Welcome, horror lovers. I'm Pete, and today we're going to embark on a journey through some of the darkness. If you're new here, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any terrifying stories. It was a dark and silent night in a small, isolated village nestled in the mountains of Luzon, Philippines. The stars seemed further away than usual, and a thick, cold mist covered the streets like a shroud of death. The village, surrounded by dense forests, was a forgotten place, where fear and mystery intertwined with daily life. It was here, in the mountainous region of Ilocos, that the tale of a shadowy being known to the locals as Balbal began. This creature, one of the most feared and talked about legends, terrorized the nights, leaving behind a trail of disappearances, suffocated screams and mutilated bodies. But to understand its origin, we must first travel back to a time long before the village was reduced to nothing more than a memory. The legend says that the Balbal is not a monster like others, but a corrupted soul, a human figure who lost its essence after making a dark pact in search of power and immortality. The story goes back to the 19th century, when the village was more prosperous, with its fields and peaceful community. A man named Armando Velasquez was known for his skill in healing diseases and injuries with natural remedies. His reputation spread far and wide, and people came from distant places seeking his cures. However, his thirst for power was greater than his desire to help others. Armando, hungry for more knowledge, decided to search for an ancient secret, a forbidden spell that promised immortality. He traveled deep into the mountains, where the elders spoke of a mysterious being, an entity capable of granting eternal life, but at a price. Accounts of this being varied, but all agreed that the creature fed on human flesh, though not just the physical meat. It devoured the souls, turning its victims into slaves of eternal fear. Armed with a book of witchcraft and a heart full of arrogance, Armando made the pact. He traded his soul for an immortal body, one that could heal any wound, but one condemned to an existence without rest. A spell was cast, and when Armando returned to the village, he was changed. His eyes, once bright, now reflected only an empty darkness. Armando continued to help the villagers, but something was deeply wrong. He seemed colder, more distant. As time passed, mysterious disappearances began to occur. People who visited Armando's home for healing never returned. The more time went on, the more grotesque he became. His human form twisted and distorted, and fear began to spread through the village. The people began calling the creature Balbal, a reference to its insatiable appetite for human flesh. The name came from the characteristic sound it made while devouring its victims. Balbal, the sound of bones snapping and flesh being consumed. Armando Velasquez's story, now known as the Balbal, was passed down from generation to generation. Witnesses who claimed to have seen the creature shared stories of its monstrous appearance. A deformed human body, pale skin, and eyes glowing red like embers, with sharp teeth and claws that sliced through the air like knives. Its voice was smooth and enticing, able to deceive even the most cautious, but those who fell into its trap never returned. One night, during a local festival, a group of villagers got lost in the forest, straying from the safety of the village in search of more food and drink. Among them was Althea, a brave and determined young woman who often questioned the local myths. She had heard her grandmother's stories about the Balbal, but she believed they were nothing more than old superstitions. When she heard that some villagers had gone missing in recent weeks, she decided to investigate for herself. Althea and her friends walked the narrow trails until nightfall, and an uneasy feeling began to settle over them. The forest seemed alive, with sounds of unknown creatures echoing through the trees, and a thick fog covered the ground. Then suddenly a figure appeared before them. It was a man, tall and thin, with pale skin and disheveled hair. His eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity. "Come," he said, his voice smooth and seductive. "I will help you find your way back home." Althea, feeling an odd sense that something was wrong, hesitated. Her friends, however, had already begun to follow the stranger without a second thought. When she shouted for them to stop, it was too late. One by one, they fell victim to the Balbal. When Althea tried to flee, she heard the horrifying sound of bones breaking and the low whisper of a hungry creature behind her. She ran, but the man, or whatever it was, followed her, its claws scraping the earth. She finally hid behind a tree, gasping for breath, hearing the muffled screams of her friends as they were consumed. The next morning, Althea found the bodies of her friends, their faces twisted in terror, their bodies lifeless, completely devoured by the creature. When she tried to tell the villagers, many doubted her, considering it just another fabricated tale. However, the disappearances continued, and the villagers began to realize the truth. Years passed, and the stories of the Balbal began to spread to neighboring villages. It was said that the creature only fed at night, preferring to hunt those who were isolated or ventured too deep into the forests. Witnesses who survived encounters with the monster were never the same. Some claimed that the Balbal was more than just a creature. It was a curse, an entity that could not be easily defeated. Many had tried to hunt it, but none returned. In the 1940s, a group of experienced hunters, hearing the reports from neighboring villages, decided to confront the creature once and for all. Armed with guns, machetes, and lanterns, they ventured deep into the forest where the Balbal had been seen. What happened that night was never fully explained, but the few survivors reported something strange. The Balbal was no longer just a creature. It had become a dark force, a being that no longer had a physical form, but existed as a living nightmare, capable of manipulating reality and the deepest fears of men. Today, many believe the Balbal still lives, a being that feeds on fear and human flesh, unable to die because its existence is a curse that endures across generations. Accounts continue to surface, and the story of the Balbal lives on, always with the same warning. Never venture into the forest at night, and never accept help from a stranger, for it could be the Balbal itself, searching for a new soul. The Hairy Hands. Legend is a well-known supernatural tale from England, particularly associated with Dartmoor in Devon. The story is a mix of mystery, eerie phenomena, and local folklore, and it has persisted for over a century. The exact origins of the Hairy Hands legend are somewhat unclear, but it is believed to have first emerged in the early 20th century, with motorist reports from the Dartmoor region. The legend revolves around a mysterious, invisible force that allegedly grabs the steering wheel of vehicles, causing the driver to lose control, often resulting in fatal accidents. The first major reports of such incidents came in the 1920s, when drivers began describing strange sensations while driving along isolated roads. They would claim that, while driving in the dark, foggy stretches of Dartmoor, they suddenly felt as if invisible hands were grabbing the wheel. The most notable of these incidents involved a man named William Lush, who was reportedly driving at night when his hands were seized by an invisible force, causing him to lose control and crash into a tree. The most distinctive feature of the hairy hands is that they are often described as huge, furry hands, unlike those of a human. In many accounts, witnesses describe the hands as being covered in thick hair, almost like those of a wild animal. The sensation of these hands gripping the wheel is often described as cold and heavy, as if they were made of something unnatural. The hands are said to appear suddenly and without warning, reaching out to grasp the driver's hands or the steering wheel, making it nearly impossible for them to control their vehicle. The force of the grip is described as terrifying, and the experience is often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread and panic. In some versions of the story, the hands are described as massive, far too large for a human to possess. The legend is most famously associated with the Two Bridges area of Dartmoor. This remote, desolate road is surrounded by vast, empty moors and forests, which already have an eerie reputation. It's here that many of the hairy hands encounters are said to take place. The phenomenon is particularly reported on foggy nights, or in the dark hours when the atmosphere is heavy with mist and the landscape is isolated and silent. Dartmoor itself is steeped in local myths and stories about ghosts, spirits, and supernatural entities, making it a natural setting for such a chilling tale. The hairy hands, in this context, are often thought to be part of a larger, otherworldly presence that haunts the roads of Dartmoor, preying on unsuspecting travelers. There have been many theories to explain the hairy hands phenomenon. Some suggest psychological explanations, such as hallucinations, or fatigue-induced delusions, especially among tired drivers or those suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. According to these explanations, the sensation of being grabbed could be a result of the driver's mind playing tricks on them after long hours on the road. Others, however, believe the tale is rooted in something much more supernatural. Theories about the origins of the hairy hands range from the idea that they are the hands of a ghost or spirit, to more fantastical suggestions like a werewolf-like creature, or a demonic entity that preys on travelers. Some even claim that the hands belong to a person who was involved in a tragic accident, and their spirit now seeks revenge or justice by attacking drivers on the same stretch of road. There is also speculation that the hands might be linked to ancient pagan rituals or mythological entities that once roamed the moors, adding to the mystery and allure of the Dartmoor region. Some claim the presence of these hands represents a curse on those who dare to venture onto the road at night. The most famous of these incidents occurred in the early 1920s, when several drivers reported their vehicles being violently pulled off course. In one particularly chilling case, a driver named William Lush claimed that, while driving alone on the Dartmoor road, he felt his hands being firmly grabbed by an invisible force, pulling the steering wheel from his control. Lush crashed his car into a tree and was lucky to survive the ordeal, though he later described feeling a cold, unnatural grip. Other accounts describe motorcyclists and even cyclists being similarly affected by the hairy hands, with many claiming they were thrown from their vehicles by the mysterious force. The phenomenon became so well known that local police even investigated reports of unexplained accidents in the area, but no explanation could ever be found. One of the most famous witnesses was a man named James Dawson, a motorcyclist who, in the 1930s, experienced the grip of the hairy hands firsthand. He claimed that as he was traveling along the road, his hands were suddenly seized by invisible, powerful hands, which caused him to crash and break his arm. Dawson swore that the sensation of the grip was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he spoke of an overwhelming sense of fear as though something or someone was intent on harming him. Despite the skepticism that surrounds the hairy hands legend, it continues to persist, with new reports and claims still emerging from the Dartmoor area. Many people still visit the region, drawn by the mystery, hoping to experience the phenomenon themselves or to catch a glimpse of the supernatural. Some travelers who have heard the tale firsthand report feeling uneasy when driving on Dartmoor at night, unsure whether their fears are born from the legend or the genuine atmosphere of the remote area. In 2014, the BBC featured the Hairy Hands story on a radio program where witnesses, historians, and paranormal experts discussed the phenomenon. The attention helped renew interest in the legend, leading to an increase in curiosity and tourists visiting Dartmoor to see if they could encounter the hairy hands themselves. The Hairy Hands story remains one of the most famous pieces of local folklore in England. While the scientific explanations might dismiss the tales as superstition or the product of vivid imaginations, the enduring nature of the legend speaks to a deeper cultural fascination with the unknown and the fear of forces beyond our control. The hairy hands remain a cautionary tale, warning travelers about the dangers of the open road, especially in desolate, remote places where the line between reality and the supernatural may seem a little thinner. In the end, the legend of the hairy hands reflects humanity's fear of the unseen, the inexplicable, and the potentially deadly forces that may lie just beyond our reach. The story continues to captivate people, offering a chilling reminder that, even today, some things cannot be fully explained. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching.